Thank you, Mr. Chair. Good evening, everybody. The purpose of this presentation tonight is for an information presentation for zoning bylaw application ZBA 618 RC. It's a zoning bylaw amendment application for the property known as 200 King Street, Creekside Village, Inc. And the agent is GSP Group. And it's being recommended that this presentation be received for information purposes this evening. There's a map here of the subject lands. North side of King Street, west of the core of Burford, and east of East Quarter Town Line Road in Burford. I would note that the actual bounds of the land were unfortunately not highlighted properly, but do include this portion that abuts and fronts onto King Street here as well. The subject lands are approximately 49.9 acres or 20.2 hectares in size, frontage of approximately 186 meters fronting on King Street, and the subject lands are irregularly shaped. The subject lands are designated urban settlement area and natural heritage system within the County of Brant's official plan. They're also located within the second urban settlement area of Burford in the county. The intent of the urban residential designation within the OP is for residential development and then conservation and passive recreational uses within the natural heritage system. This is the zoning mapping for the subject lands. The subject lands are zoned both agricultural to the south and east of the property, as well as natural heritage to the north and west of the property. Other restrictions or regulations on the property include significant regulation from the Grand River Conservation Authority, primarily in the north and west of the property, being Whiteman's Creek running through the north side of the property, and then the Lewis Drain running along the western edge of the property, as well as within the official plan designated woodland vegetation and significant wetlands. So the proposed development is to rezone a portion of the subject lands, which are highlighted in white, to facilitate the development of a 158-unit adult lifestyle community, complete with private servicing facilities, as well as a clubhouse and other amenities for the residents. This is the proposed site plan. We would consider it in a concept plan form at this time, but you can see the general access to the site is through two entrances off of King Street, with private roads running through the site, servicing 158 units, including single detached and townhouse dwelling units, as well as private servicing amenities and the clubhouse located in the northwesterly portion of the developable block. Some of the key issues that have been identified on this site include the environmental issues, obviously with the Whiteman's Creek, as well as the regulated areas for the GRCA and the Lewis Drain. The GRCA has undertaken a review of the site. We just received those comments today, so we haven't really had a chance to digest them at this time, and they're not available for our discussion tonight, but there is significant concern with the proposed development within the westerly portion of the property, specifically in the area of the Lewis Drain here, and how it impacts the downstream effects on Whiteman's Creek. Other issues or items that need to be addressed would include servicing, specifically the private servicing being proposed and how it will be adequately meet the needs of the site, and as well as how the county will become responsible for a future responsibility agreement through the Ministry of Environment and this proposed development. In addition, there have been some neighborhood concerns that have come forward. The major topics include impacts on the Lewis Drain, and then the expected flooding that we do see currently on site, as well as the traffic flows and just the overall compatibility of the proposed development with the surrounding area. So the next steps for this development, post information and coming into a recommendation for the zoning bylaw amendment. The application will need to be reviewed, and the review is ongoing for internal and external agencies. Those comments will be received, forwarded to the applicant, and there will be further discussion and review facilitated. Staff are of the preference that a site plan control application be submitted for review for the key technical components that are not being reviewed at the zoning bylaw stage. Given the scale and the technical, I think uniqueness is the word that we would use for this site, there's a lot of components that we would like to review at the site plan stage in advance of a recommendation for the zoning bylaw amendment coming forward. Notice for a formal public hearing, being the recommendation meeting, will be circulated in the appropriate manner under the Planning Act, and a formal public hearing with a presentation from staff with a recommendation report will be forthcoming once we are satisfied with the various concerns being addressed. So again, if there's any questions, we have some information if we'd be able to provide that to any of the committee members. Thank you.
Any member of the committee have any questions or a planner? I'll get to you, sir. Seeing none. Thank you, Ryan. Is the applicant or the agent of the applicant here would like to make a presentation? Yes. Please come forward, state your name. Obviously, you're from the GSP.
I am.
Mm-hmm. There we go. The overhead lights.
Yes, if you don't mind. I'm just going to do the glass switch. Thank you. Good evening. My name is Brenda Case. I'm from GSP Group, and I'm a planner, and I represent the owners this evening. And Jim Brown will be providing part of the presentation with me when I reach a certain point, so I'll be calling him up. Also here this evening we have Glenn Harold, who's an engineer from Oak Pavers, and he deals with permeable pavers and low-impact development. He's an expert in those areas. We also have Rob Mielek, who is our civil engineer, dealing with the floodplain modeling of the site, because there's a lot of engineering issues associated with this site. We also have Joe Whitlock, of Newterra, who deals with wastewater management, and we have Dr. Jennifer Drake, and she is a leading expert in low-impact development and green infrastructure in Canada. So we have quite a team here that we hope will be able to answer any questions that come up from the committee or the public. So now I've got to find that little clicker you gave me. Here we go, thank you. All right. There we go. Okay, so this evening we've already been introduced to the property. The front portion is frontage right on King Street, and what we're actually trying to do is provide an adult lifestyle development that's unique to this area. We're looking at maintaining that natural area that Ryan told you about and keeping it in its natural state. We're also looking at incorporating 114 singles. We're also looking at 44 townhouse units and a clubhouse in the northeast corner, as well as an office down at the southwest corner. The idea is this will be under one single ownership, and they will be leases for the actual units. It's a life lease model, so it's not going to be, you're not going to own your individual lots. It will be a leasing situation, which means that Creekside Village will actually manage the overall development, maintain the ownership, and ensure that it's run properly. So it also means that there'll be a basic rent. That's what's charged for the sole use of the dwelling itself. There'll be obviously a home and a site tax as well as a maintenance charge, but that's basically what we're talking about. So you're not actually buying a lot, you're buying the house in the form of a lease agreement. The development also includes a couple of private parks and some trails with connections. So those green arrows that you see are the connections throughout. Next, in terms of parking, parking has always been identified in adult lifestyle communities as an issue because you've got family members coming to visit and parking ends up overflowing onto the streets. So on purpose, we have identified the units will be designed, every unit will have 2 parking spaces in the front of their building as well as 2 parking spaces in the driveway. And that applies to both the singles and the townhouses. We also have specific locations for visitor parking. On top of those 4 spaces per unit, we have We have 47 spaces located next to the clubhouse. We have another 7 spaces located adjacent to the office, the main office at the front. We have 28 spaces, visitor parking spaces next to an open space park area. And what that means is a total of 714 parking spaces for this development. So we are confident there's going to be no overflow parking whatsoever. It works out to a parking ratio of 4.5 spaces per unit, which is pretty much unheard of. In terms of access and trails, as Ryan said, we've got 2 main driveways that will provide 2-way traffic into the development. This will be a private roadway. We also have a trail that goes around the northern end of the development, the west and northern end, and that's, we hope it's going to be a lovely trail right adjacent to the natural area, and the idea is to provide some active walking for the residents. In addition, we've got, as I noted, the private roadways, which will be designed in such a way that they'll be completely accessible in terms of meeting the accessibility standards. The idea is that we want to ensure that every form of mobility can be accommodated in this development, from walkers to canes to even scooters. Again, with accessibility, we've actually gone before the accessibility committee, and they're quite pleased with our proposal. And the key is, when you're looking at developments, and we've had some discussions with staff about this, and we're still obviously working through the process, but sidewalks are an issue for people with mobility devices. As you can see in the picture, there's grade changes associated with a sidewalk. As you enter somebody's driveway, there's grade changes along the sidewalk. There's the dip down, and that's where those arrows are pointing. It's a dip down when you're traveling along the sidewalk and you reach somebody's driveway. So for that reason, we're not proposing to have sidewalks. And this is something we are discussing with staff, because on the surface, as a planner, I'd say, why don't you have sidewalks? We need sidewalks. In this case, there's a reason behind it. It's not because you don't want to provide it. It's not a cost-saving situation. This is the best solution from an accessibility perspective. And again, this just shows you, again, what we're talking about in terms of grade changes. We want to minimize the grade from the house to the garage to the driveway to the roadway. And the idea is that everything would be in the form of permeable pavers. It'll be a standard surface throughout. You actually see 2 different surfaces here. That's not the intent for our development. That was just a picture to convey the idea that we're talking about. So minimal grade change from the house to the garage to the driveway to the private street. So what is it going to look like? We're talking about having singles, and all the singles will be 1-story. They'll all have 2-car garages, as I said. They'll range in size from 138 to 244 meters squared, which is about 1,500 square feet to 1,800 square feet. All the homes will be 100% accessible. It's not going to be you buy a special unit that this is an accessible one, this one isn't. They all will be. Single floor living with all wide doors and hallways. We've got grab bars proposed in all of the washrooms and throughout. No threshold showers in the ensuite. The raised toilets. All of that will be a standard feature in all of the units. In terms of the townhouses, same idea in terms of all the features that I just talked to you about, only from a townhouse perspective. So again, only 1-story. Each of the units, whether they're singles or the townhouses, have a minimum front yard of 7.5 meters and a minimum rear yard of 7.5 meters. Oh, I'm sorry, the townhouses will be around 1,700 square feet. Next, we have the clubhouse, and we're really excited about the clubhouse that we're proposing, because there are a lot of amenities we're proposing for this development. We've got an indoor pool, indoor saltwater pool, a banquet hall with a stage and piano, a large kitchen, pool tables, shuffleboards, card tables, a workshop, a fitness gym, multi-purpose rooms, a library, a mail room. It's unlimited in terms of, we still have to figure out exactly what the residents want, but we want to provide a facility that has that type of flexibility. Next, we talk about the development approval process. We've gone through the pre-consultation process and identified the range of studies, which I'm going to talk about in a moment. In addition, that's why we're here. We're required to submit a zoning bylaw amendment application, followed by site plan approval. Now, we have been advised by staff that they would, their preference is that a site plan application be submitted as a part of the application. We still are having those discussions, and part of our concern is we believe that at this stage, sufficient information has been provided to determine the principle of the land use through the zoning process. But I was speaking to Rob a couple of minutes ago, and we may be able to reach some type of an agreement in terms of what type of information we can provide. So we do very much want to work with municipality, but to put the level of detail that would be required for site plan approval is, without knowing whether or not the principle of land use has been accepted, is difficult for us to palate at this point. So in terms of the studies, there's a long list of studies that are required. We have to do a planning justification report. They're just going to start rhyming off. We have to do a planning justification report that talks about land use. It talks about appropriateness of development, adjacent land uses. How do we make it fit in? What type of uses are appropriate? What type of zoning standards do we need? We've undertaken an archaeological assessment to ensure there aren't any key resources that need to be addressed. We have done an environmental impact study that has been submitted to address the environmental features to the north and west. We've done a traffic impact study, which looks at what the traffic impact will be on King Street and adjacent neighbors, as well as it goes so far as to look at the intersections further to the west. In addition, we've done a geotechnical report, a hydrogeological investigation, a functional servicing report, and floodplain mapping. So we've done a lot of engineering work too, but to support the application. So it's not like we've just come in and said, this is a good idea. Now, some of the key issues that have been identified did talk about environmental servicing and neighborhood compatibility. So all the studies that we've submitted, we hope, have addressed those issues. As noted by Ryan, the property is designated urban residential along the frontage along King Street. It's the rear portion, the whole thing is part of the secondary urban settlement area, and the northern portion is designated natural heritage. Low-density residential development is permitted. It's a permitted land use. We don't need an official plan amendment. So this development is in conformity with the intent and purpose of the land use that's being proposed. We still have to deal with details, obviously. In terms of the Brant County official plan, the site is zoned agricultural and natural heritage. More than one dwelling unit isn't permitted on a lot, and we're keeping this as one lot. So we need to have a zoning bylaw amendment to deal with the type of land lease ownership lease situation that we're dealing with, as well as the site specifics related to how we're going to set up this development with the private roads, et cetera. So obviously we know there are going to be concerns from the community, and we're very happy that everyone's here this evening. And the interface between the existing residential and the proposed development is obviously key. We recognize that the area adjacent to those existing single detached dwellings that front King Street in front of our property are key. And we want to be good neighbors, absolutely. So what we're talking about is a minimum 7.5 meter setback, which is 25 feet from the rear property line. Now, these lots that are fronting King Street are large. They're not your typical urban lots. They're around, I think they range between 50 and 75 feet wide, and they're more than 300 feet deep. And most of the houses are close to the front. So the separation distance between the houses that are actually fronting King Street and this proposed development is quite a bit. Regardless of that, we want to ensure that the rear yard setback of those units that are along the rear lot line of that existing development, as well as the most westerly single detached dwelling, that they have some comfort in knowing that there's a minimum of 7.5 meters. In addition, we're proposing to construct a 1.5 meter privacy fence along that lot, those two lot lines there, adjacent to that existing residential development. We're also looking at the interface along King Street, and we're going to put in a 3 meter wide landscape strip to create a nice street presence along the street, as well as a fence. So in terms of the interface, we are ensuring through the zoning bylaw that they're 1-story elevation for the singles and the townhouses. We've got that 7.5 meter setback, we've got a privacy fence, and we've got a landscape buffer. Also, in terms of the privacy fencing, I thought I'd just give you an idea of what we are anticipating it could look like. We still would deal with that through the approval of the site plan, the landscape plan, but this is sort of what we're thinking of along that property line that backs onto the residential dwellings, and this is what we're thinking of for the street presence along King Street. And in terms of King Street, we would combine that with some landscaping. So we would like to have a significant landscape strip along King Street that would provide a nice entrance into the community and still provide privacy to the residents that are in behind. The next issue would obviously be traffic and overflow parking. I think I've talked about the traffic and the overflow from that perspective, the parking. From a traffic perspective, Paradigm Transportation Solutions completed an in-depth traffic analysis, transportation analysis, which identified that the traffic that would be generated from this development wouldn't warrant turning lanes, and that recognizing that King Street is a rural arterial road, that the road can accommodate the proposed traffic. So we believe that the transportation impact study has demonstrated that there isn't going to be a major impact on existing traffic, doesn't mean there isn't going to be an increase in traffic, it just means the road can accommodate it. Next, in terms of servicing, and I think this is one of the major ones because we're proposing something different. We're looking at a communal well system, we're looking at in terms of wastewater, a private communal wastewater system. We're looking at stormwater management dealt with through low-impact development. And we're looking at Creekside actually owning those facilities, but having them managed independently by a third party, so that we would ensure that it is being managed properly. So this is something that, I think this is the area that staff and the Conservation Authority, that at a municipal level, there's some concern about it because it's new. So we have worked very diligently, and we have, as I said, all the experts here to answer questions. But the key is, from a private communal well system, we have done the studies that demonstrate that there will be no impact on the local wells. We've identified that all the wastewater will be treated on site and discharged to the Lewis Drain, and Jim's going to give you an idea of the quality of water that's going to come out of this system. In addition, as I said, we're going to own the facilities but have them managed by a third party. So I don't want to go into details until we have more specific questions, but we do have questions answers to the majority of your questions, I hope. So now I'd like to call up Jim, who's going to give you an idea of the next steps. So just use the arrow to move.
For those of you who don't know me, my name is Jim Brown. I'd like to thank you for taking the time to hear our application tonight. It was 3 long years ago that I first presented Creekside Village to you when we were seeking a management responsibility agreement as it would relate to our wastewater treatment plant. That was a very positive experience and allowed us to move forward with our concept. Since then, we've completed all the required reports, as Brenda has outlined here, and conducted extensive research that will help improve the overall development. We have traveled all over North America, Greece, South Korea, and spoken with many experts, consultants, and suppliers in an attempt to build a better mousetrap that would see Creekside Village as one of the most innovative, environmentally complete developments that will permit people to live in place longer. We have attended all of the meetings that were organized by Lucy Marco from the Grand River Council on Aging and MPP Dave Levac. Lucy was one of the experts who composed the Master Aging Plan, and this document has gained worldwide recognition for its content. We have sought input from Brant Accessibility Committee, had discussions with many experts, and held a wine and cheese function at other 55-plus communities, looking to learn from the good, the bad, and the ugly of each community. And we have received ideas and suggestions from many of them, and some of you here tonight, that we've implemented into the development. We have attended many Conservation Authority seminars hosted by the Credit Valley Conservation Authority, the Toronto Regional Conservation Authority, and we've met and consulted with experts from all over North America. We have engaged in research with the University of Toronto and Ryerson University, who are experts in the field of low-impact development, the environment, and water. We held a public meeting at the Burford Legion where there were over 100 people in attendance, including 2 councillors, the business community, and residents, and we received extremely positive feedback from them. We have met with Paul Burnett, who is the owner and producer from NGH TV, who has deemed Creekside Village to be one of the best developments in North America. He has several shows that people would recognize. We've entered into an agreement with Paul where he will be filming a 30-episode series called First to the Future at Creekside Village, where he'll be showcasing technologies, what can be in the future. Paul and his team will be here for the 11th time from Seattle in July to set up filming schedules and interviews. Creekside Village is striving to create the best overall adult lifestyle community, permitting our residents to enjoy an active, healthy lifestyle with the ability to live in place longer, while integrating with the local communities and the environment. Our focus is on the environment. We have many features to be the best that we can be. Energy and water conservation. We will use 1/3 of the water of the average Canadian home and a fraction of the energy. Our future residents will provide a community that will keep them engaged and active, which is also designed to permit them to live in place longer. And the local community. We've designed it to integrate our residents with the existing Burford and Brant County communities to increase social contact and help support local businesses. We will have our own wastewater treatment plant, which will be designed, installed, operated, and monitored by Nuterra, which is a third-party licensed operator. This is the best available technology, and the discharge from its water is so clean that it has been certified by the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change as potable water. We're not ready to do that, but that's how clean the water is. The unit will also be disguised as a house for aesthetic reasons, so you will drive by it not realizing that's what it is. A year ago, March 22nd, this was the executives from Nuterra drinking water that came out of their membrane bioreactor. We are a low-impact development, and we have consulted with many experts from many perspectives. Creekside will use many low-impact features, including permeable pavement, bioswales, rainwater harvesting, and water reuse. There are many benefits for permeable pavement, and it is a primary feature of our development. It will result in no stormwater runoff, reduced heat island effect, and reduction in many pollutants. This is used all over the world and becoming more commonplace in North American cities such as Vancouver, Edmonton, Calgary, St. Louis, Minnesota, Minneapolis, Chicago, Toronto, Kitchener, Chambly, Quebec, New Hampshire, New Jersey, and throughout the southern states. This is a picture of the Huron Nature Area that was installed a few years ago by the City of Kitchener. And all the reports show that it has far exceeded its expectations and met what it was designed to do, including a 25-year storm they had last summer or the summer before. Creekside Village will also feature homes and street lightings that are dark skies compliant, Carolinian prairie grass, which is endangered in this part, and drought-tolerant turf grass. 3 years ago, we entered into a 5-year agreement with the University of Toronto, and they are in the 3rd year of their before, during, and after research. Dr. Jennifer Drake is one of the foremost experts in low-impact development in Canada, and she will be doing the research to determine how these developments can be done in the future. Last year, they received a grant from the Natural Sciences and Engineering Research Council. And this year, the University of Toronto and Ryerson University have applied for a very significant NSERC grant that would see them conduct a long-term study on all aspects of water. They describe Creekside Village as the most unique research opportunity and the first study of its kind in Canada. We've had a significant contact with the local residents, the business community, many agencies, special interest groups, the Ontario Federation of Agriculture, many conservation authorities, the Ministry of Natural Resources, the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change, Southern Ontario Water Consortium, and more, who have all offered their support, many of whom have offered input and suggestions that have been incorporated into Creekside. Municipally, there are a lot of benefits. An increased tax base, a new stable population that will have approximately $12 million in annual income at their disposal. Creekside Village is self-sufficient, so the roads, water, wastewater treatment are all provided by the developer at no cost to Brant County. This will result in a 19% increase in population in the settlement area that will add many benefits to the business and the community alike. It'll create a vibrant influx of people to Burford and Brant County to support the businesses and new resources for local churches, service clubs, and volunteer organizations. We will create significant short-term employment for the construction stage and create a fair amount of long-term employment both on Creekside directly and the surrounding area to support the Creekside community. We will increase walking trails for the Creekside residents as well as trails for the general public as well. It's an option for farmers who want to stay close to family when they retire and not leave their community. The extra residents will create sufficient commerce to help expand or at least maintain many of the businesses in the downtown core. It also provides us an opportunity to learn from the university research that will be going on there and become a leader in both low impact and environmental developments. I want to thank you for your time and consideration. I know a lot of this is new information and technology, but I believe that we are at the leading edge of what environmentally friendly developments can look like. We are not a large developer. In fact, all of the partners are here wearing the blue Creekside shirts are here this evening. This is a family business. We will be operating a business in Brant County for the foreseeable future, and we will remain in and be a part of this community. This development will be built properly, as you can either pay now or pay later, and I don't want to deal with any problems later, so we're putting the research in up front. This is a very brief overview of what we are attempting to achieve at Creekside, and we would be pleased to discuss this further or answer any questions that the council or public may have. Thank you.
Jim, can you stay with, yes, representative from GSP is coming back. Is there any members of the committee that have questions of our presenters? Member Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, first of all, thank you for that presentation. There's a lot of information there, but it was very well done. The question I have is, you talked about having no sidewalks. I understand the concept behind that, and it's great, but is there going to be like markings on the roadway, and is the roadway the extra 3-4 feet wider in order to accommodate what would be area for a sidewalk?
We have pictures of 6 similar communities. We actually have pictures of many more, but of 6 of them that have the same size roads on them that we're proposing. And those, it's a mixture. Some of them have sidewalks on it, and they don't allow parking on the street. Some of them have sidewalks on it and allow parking on the street, and some of them don't have sidewalks at all. The night before we went to the accessibility committee, my wife and I were sitting there, and there's 2 ladies who were walking towards us, and I said, get a picture of them, because they're not walking on the sidewalk. And they walked by us, and we didn't realize when they crossed the road, the sidewalk changed sides. So I went, they're not walking beside it anymore, they're walking on the opposite side. So we went up, and when they turned the corner, I was going to take the same picture, and they walked on the opposite side of the sidewalk again. So I pulled up and said, how come you guys aren't walking on the sidewalk? And they explained to us that the sidewalks are uneven, the sidewalks have tripping hazards, the sidewalks aren't wide enough to accommodate 2 people power walking side by side. So they said that everybody walks on the street.
Right. No, sorry to interrupt you, Jim. I understand that, but what I'm looking at is it just going to, because the picture I saw there just had a street on it. There was no markings as to, you know, where people are going to be walking or whatever. Is there going to be like a line that shows this is for people walking, or are they just going to be able to walk anywhere on the street?
We could put a line there if we need to, but I don't think that we're going to need to. The communities that we've been in, there's a 20-kilometer speed limit in there. The people walk down the sides. The cars drive nice and slowly through the middle. It's something we can look at, but I don't think that it's something that we really need to do. They're going to ignore the lines anyway. They're going to want to walk. They'll walk where they want to walk.
Touche.
And the other part of it was when we met with the accessibility, there were 3 people there in scooters. And the feet in that picture where Denise is standing on the angle, when we showed that, and he says, how do you think we feel? He says, when you're in the scooter and you go down that, you're borderline tipping. So they don't like the sidewalks either. They like to be able to have the extra room.
Okay. Thank you.
Member Cardy.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to Mr. Brown. Jim, earlier in your presentation, you talked about learning about the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I guess one of my questions is what did you learn from other 55-plus communities that you feel you benefited from to make this a more exceptional 55-plus community?
What we learned from talking to the people is that they're not buying just a house, it's a lifestyle. They buy extended friends and extended family. They're looking for opportunities to interact and make friends and create memories. And they want easy access to these people. It's hard to meet people when you don't have kids and you're not going to sporting events or interacting. That's what our clubhouse will be. It'll be the heartbeat of the community. We learned that people want to downsize without having to downgrade. In some cases, there aren't communities that have reasonable amenities. Many of them identified features that have been incorporated into the design of our homes that will make life easier for them. They want to live life without having to do the maintenance, so they don't want to cut grass, they don't want to shovel snow, and they want to be able to put the key in, lock the door, and leave for 6 months and not have to worry about their house. Parking, as Brenda said, is the #1 complaint. All the ones that we've been to, and we've been to most of them in Ontario and throughout many places in North America, they average 1.8 parking spots per unit. We're at 4.5, and we can expand higher than that if we need to. I'm sure we're not going to, but we do have the ability to do that if we have to. Pets was the second most identified complaint. So we'll have rules in place that the expandable leash is one of the #1 complaints. People don't like them standing right at the edge and the dog runs up and does its trick, or it scares them as it runs towards them. So they'll have 4-foot leash, limit on the leash that they can walk their pets on. And all pets of any kind must be on a leash if it's off your property. There was other stuff that we learned, but it was, some of it was humorous, some of it was useful, but it was very worthwhile doing. That we have eliminated some of the problems with hours that other ones have to live with.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Just one more quick question. I think it's an important question, and I don't know if it's for you or one of your people working with you. On the matter of the floodplain, how will this development affect the floodplains in terms of water flow and volume? That could be critical.
Rob?
Hi. Yeah, thank you. The floodplain, flow and volume. We have done a flood mapping study as Brenda indicated. The flood mapping study, the conclusion, there were a few, but one of them was that the development is not going to impact the flood surface elevation along the Lewis Drain or in Whiteman's Creek. The flood storage volume, certainly the rear lots abutting the Lewis Drain, we are proposing to do some filling in the floodplain there in order to get the yards outside of the floodplain, to get them up out of the floodplain. To offset that and actually to provide an increase in the flood storage volume, there is cutting proposed within the floodplain as well to remove material to replace that flood storage that was lost by filling the yards, and in fact, under the 500-year flood elevation, to provide more flood storage. Does that answer your question?
Thank you very much.
Member Chambers.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. A question to Jim through you and maybe through Jim. I'm curious, I'm wondering if Dr. Drake might elaborate a little bit on what her research is going to be in conjunction with the natural areas and the Lewis Drain, et cetera. Maybe she can elaborate a little bit on that.
Hi, good evening. So I'm Jennifer Drake. So as was already outlined, we've been collaborating with Creekside Village since 2015. We have a formalized collaboration and visiting science agreement, which allows my students to come and access the property. And for the past 3 summers, we've been installing instruments into Whitemans Creek and Lewis Drain to try and get a sense of the existing conditions. I'm a researcher that specializes in green infrastructure and low-impact development, and sort of the most elusive research site to find is a site that you can track as it changes. Because there's no way for you to understand cause and effect if you don't have a picture of before and after. And so we've been working on trying to get that before perspective, because without it, anything that should happen in the future, I'd have no way of understanding. And so to support that work, I've had a PhD student that's been managing the data collection. And then last summer, we received our first funding from NSERC, NSERC Engaged Grant, which is a small, to start new relationships, collaboration relationships between academia and industry. And with this funding, we installed one of our more sophisticated equipments on the property called a lysimeter, which has been measuring evapotranspiration rates, which is something I'm very excited about because there's not a lot of data on the evapotranspiration. And what we're now in the process of doing is applying for more significant funding from NSERC for a 3-year research support that would fund 5 graduate students, bring together not only myself, but my colleagues, Professor Sachs at the University of Toronto, who's an expert in sustainable infrastructure, and Professor Claire Oswald from Ryerson, who specializes in urban water quality, so that we could really, we have this very unique opportunity to observe and understand what the environmental impacts when we have development, because our role as researchers is to help us understand what those are so that we can improve, and also to help mitigate the risks that are associated with being bold and innovative, because no one's done things before. So we need to have that rigorous scientific data so that we can say with confidence that, yes, this technology does all the things that we know it does at the individual level. Now let's discuss what happens when you do it at a neighborhood scale.
Member Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through to the applicant, 2 questions. I'll ask them both at the same time. I remember at the Burford meeting, it was mentioned, I don't know if it was by you, Jim, or one of the experts you've got on staff there, that this development would save approximately a third energy and a third water versus, say, a traditional development. And so I'd like to know how that's possible. Quite interested. Second question is around the permeable pavers. I'm just wondering how those permeable pavers work in our environment, given we have the cold winters that we do.
I can answer the first one, and then I'll get Glenn Harrell to answer the second. We've looked at all ways of trying to reduce our energy usage and our impact. From the water standpoint, we can cut down to a third of the water used by the average Canadian home. There's a Proficiency Toilet. It's a 3-liter flush toilet. I've had it in for just shy of 3 years now. It works perfect. When you look at the design and you look at the physics behind it, you wonder why we haven't had it done sooner. It's a great operation. Utilizing that toilet in our development that we have up there, instead of the 4.8-liter flush, will save us 2.3 million liters of water per year, plus the energy to pump it out of the ground, treat it chemically, pump it around for other use in all the homes. Once it's used, we got to pump it back to our wastewater treatment plant, treat it again, and then pump it into the drain. The Nebula shower head, they've basically taken same principles as used in a jet engine, and they've atomized the water. So you get a feeling of 10 times the water, that's their claim, is 10 times the water on your body using 70% less water. We've had that at our place for over a year. You definitely feel like there's a whole lot more water on you than what you get with an existing one. That saves 5.3 million liters of water in that development, plus everything else I said, and the natural gas that would be required to heat that water because people normally have warm showers. We're going to utilize drought-tolerant turf grass throughout. It has a huge impact on the energy requirements because the roots grow 14 inches, so after it's established, you never water it again. 2 years ago when we had that severe drought, there were places in Ancaster and Woodstock that have this in place, and it's like walking on a sponge. You cut it 9 to 10 times a year, not 26 to 30 times a year. So there's noise pollution, there's energy we won't be utilizing to do that, and we keep the monthly costs down for the people that are going to be living there. 55% of the water that's used in a home in Canada is used to irrigate your lawn and gardens. So if you start looking at the savings that we're going to put from the water standpoint, it's significant. The glass, we have electrochromatic glass. In the last decade, energy required to heat a home has dropped by 45% because of all the increasing standards and insulation. Energy required to cool a home has dropped 0%. We have glass that we have just installed into our place in Dundas. It blocks 97.5% of solar heat gain out on the outside pane of the glass, which will cut down your energy or cooling costs significantly. We have LED lighting throughout the homes and the street lights, and we're proposing to dim our street lights even further from midnight to 6 a.m., which means we're going to save between 85 and 90% of the cost and the energy that you use in a typical subdivision today. We have superior insulation. We're far exceeding what code is, and it's a spray foam insulation, so it has multi-purposes of creating the vapor barrier. And we are utilizing smart home technology that not only controls the lighting and reduces the costs, but it's safety. So if somebody's coming home at night and they've lost their spouse and they're nervous about coming home to a dark, quiet home, when they press the button on the garage door, it turns on the outside lights if they're not on, the indoor, their hallway, their kitchen light, and puts on a radio station for them. And conversely, if you're going to get up at night, you press the button beside the bedside, turns on your bedroom, bathroom, hallway, and kitchen light so you can get up, go to the bathroom, go to the kitchen, grab a drink, take your meds if that's what's needed, come back to bed, press the button, pull the covers up because 9 seconds later the lights go out. Number one cause of broken hips is people getting up at night to go to the bathroom. So if we can have an impact on that, it has trickle-down effects as well.
Member Coleman.
Oh, there was a second question.
Oh, I thought you asked.
Speak to that? The permeable pavement
Yeah,
first?
yeah.
So I just want to, I've been involved in a lot of permeable pavement research in Ontario. There's actually a number of installations throughout. You can find them at GO stations. Projects that I've been involved with is the Courtright Center in Vaughan that's been in place for almost getting closer to 10 years, IMAX headquarters, and even municipal parking lots in St. Catharines. There's a number of different permeable pavements, the most durable of which are interlocking concrete pavers, and that's what's being proposed on this product. They work like a traditional interlocking product, except you have open spaces to allow the water to infiltrate, and you change the sub-base. So you have the capacity to store the water and then allow it to percolate into the ground. In the winter, when it's cold, everything's frozen. And so everything is in a solid ice, snow, and so you still need to plow and you still need to have those sorts of regular operations. But what happens is when you get that nice, even a cold day, but the sun is out, water will start to melt, and as soon as it turns into the liquid phase, it goes down to that sub-base. The pavements have an empty ratio of about 40%. When we put regular concrete down to try and reduce cracking, we add empty space of about 7%. So you never have the saturated conditions that cause that kind of like frost heave that we might think of. And what's happening there is that you run out of empty space for the water when it freezes and expands. You don't have that happening in the permeable pavements. We're actually in the process of conducting looking at the friction of these surfaces in the winter, and what we notice is that, you know, once you get the ideal conditions, or you even, if you, in some cases, if you are even using salt for de-icing practices, the permeable pavements respond much faster in terms of drying up and having that friction return. And more importantly, what you don't have happening, which you do on traditional asphalt, is that melt water accumulating in a pothole or some kind of low area and then refreezing at night, which is what ultimately then leads to the slips and falls or skids with the vehicles. And you don't have that because the water is going underneath and then moving on.
Sorry, hi, Glenn Harold. I am one of the manufacturer of the products. I represent that company. I am actually a professional engineer. My degree is in water management from University of Waterloo. I have been traveling North America for the last 15 years, basically helping designers throughout the continent develop these systems. So when you talk about how these are developed, like Jen and I create documents like this. One is industry-based. The most recent is being released this year. It's an American Society of Civil Engineers document that tells designers how to design these systems. So Jen and I are two of probably about 25 authors from throughout North America. Okay? So when I say she's done the research, I'm more on the practical side. I'm the one that's on site helping develop these things. There is a similar subdivision to this in Idaho that I was involved in. And you think Idaho is the US, but it's north of us. 2 million square feet of permeable pavers were put in the roads. That's the only source of stormwater management. What happens, and when you say permeable pavements, people think it is a pavement, and wait, the water doesn't go anywhere. Where is it going? Think of it more as an infiltration gallery. Okay? People direct water to an infiltration gallery. It's spread out over the soils and allowed to drain in. So that's what a permeable pavement is. It lets the water get into the soil, into the aggregates, and filter in. So your infiltration gallery is the entire road width. This subdivision has been in place for about 4 years now, continuously expanding, and last time I talked to anybody there, everything was working fine. This past weekend, I was at the Federation of Canadian Municipalities conference in Halifax. I was speaking to people from Newmarket that have a test site, Aurora has a test site, Toronto has a test site, and Kitchener has a test site. And there were representatives, councillors, staff members there. And I asked each one of them when I had the opportunity, how are their systems working? And again, they're all very positive comments. Okay, is that?
Thank you very much.
Okay.
Member Cole.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Brown, you haven't missed anything, but I think the thing I'm concerned because of even fire protection.
I've met several times with the deputy chief. There are 3 cisterns that are designed to go in specific locations on the chart up there. If I didn't bring my pointer, but one here, one in here, and one up there. There's 3 very large cisterns. I can't remember if it's 10,000 gallons each. I don't remember the number. But there's 3 there that will provide them more than enough opportunity to get their shuttle going, where they will just continuously bring in the water as required.
Member Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to the presenters. I was quite impressed when I saw the owners of the company prepared to drink the water from their wastewater treatment plant. And it was at Nuterra, or what was it?
Nuterra is the company.
Yeah, Nuterra. And has that treatment plant from that company been approved for use by the MOE?
I'm going to get Joe from Nuterra to answer that.
And while he's coming up, I know that Councillor Miller actually visited one at a site, and he came back with praises about how it certainly didn't smell, so that's good to hear.
Go ahead, Joe.
Thanks, Jim.
Maybe you could tell them about the site as well.
That's good.
Yeah, the technology that we employ is high-end technology. It's the best-known technology for treating domestic wastewater. And even the folks in our building, we do treat from toilet to tap, but fair to say there is some polishing on the effluent line as well, just to make sure a sensitive stomach isn't going to get upset by it. But yes, they're approved. We currently have 14 approvals in Ontario alone. This is disregarding the rest of North America and the Caribbean. And we have 15 of them in process for approval as well. And they are all discharging into sensitive surface water receivers or into subsurface scenarios where there are groundwater tables of concern, so nitrate and other contaminants are of concern. So yes, it's to a point now where in Ontario the approval process gets relatively straightforward for us because there's a lot of comfort, I think, from the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change on our treatment process.
Thank you.
Member Powell.
Can I just add to that for a second?
Oh, sorry.
If you don't mind? We took a number of people up to Talbotville. They have a site that they have been developing for some time, and it's designed ultimately to run 1,750 homes off of that system. They're currently doing, I believe, is it 250, Joe? 250. So there's 250 homes being on it right now, and when we were there with the others, we were standing on top of it for about 20 minutes before we asked if there's any way of seeing the membrane, and they peeled back the AstroTurf that we were standing on, and there was a grid, 1 by 3 inch grid, and you look down and there was the water being churned up. That was the raw sewage. We had been standing on it with basically no barrier between us and had no idea that that's where it was. So there is no smell from it, and the noise, if you're outside very far away, the buzz that you're hearing here is similar to the noise that you would hear 10 feet away from the unit.
Thank you.
Now we'll get to Member Powell.
Through you, Chairman, to Mr. Brown, with the new policies and regulations from the federal and provincial government about purchasing homes, especially the new bank rates that banks are charging, and considering the person's going to buy the house but not the land, and the environment is going out to a third party, not the municipality, how are the big banks handling this, or have you any indication so far?
We've had conversations with TD Bank, and they were at our public meeting in October. They have no concerns with it. They treat it as any other house, and that's basically what you have to do. It's really a mindset. It's not designed to disadvantage anybody by having the leased land. It's designed to allow us to accomplish what we need to as one lot there, and for other reasons. There's less headaches with leased land than there is with condo associations. They could be operated more in a business-like manner. So they do it up in New Hamburg. They have a specialist that deals up in New Hamburg. They have 3 55-plus communities up there. And we've met with her, Kathy, I can't think of her last name. In any event, they were there, and they're looking at financing the overall development for some of the infrastructure costs that we'll need up front, and also the individual homes.
Thank you. Member Simons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you to Mr. Brown. Thank you so much for the detailed concept that you've given us. It's really good, and it has been around for quite a while. So my question to you is the roads. because this is a private enterprise, what will be the width of your roads, interior roads,
We're looking at the roads of being 21 feet.
which is how many meters? 7.5?
I think it's just under 7.
Yeah, okay, thank you. That's all the questions I have.
Any other member of the committee with a question? Thank you very much. Now, I'd like all of you to go back to your seat and pay attention, because I'm going to turn this over to the audience. I'm sure there'll be questions, and we've got a lot of individuals here tonight that are going to make a presentation and have questions, and when they're all done, I'll call you back up to answer them. I'm going to turn this over now to members of the audience to make a presentation. Please come forward. Don't be shy. You took the time to come. Come forward and make your presentation. And if you do have questions, we'll kind of keep an eye on them, and we'll call either staff or members of the presenter up to answer them when everybody has had an opportunity to speak. Please come forward, state your name, and make your presentation, ma'am.
My name is Lucy Marco. I'm president of the Grand River Council on Aging, and I'm here to say I cannot imagine not going forward with this project, and I'm speaking for the residents of this county, because it was the residents that told the Council on Aging that as they aged and their families left town or left their farm, they had no place to go, and there was not enough options to choose from for them to live in a community that they've spent their life in, paid the taxes, brought up their kids. Didn't want to move into the city of Brantford, wanted to live in the county, someplace. And I was so excited when this development came to the Grand River Council on Aging. They had read our master aging plan for Brantford and Brant County, 99 recommendations from people that live here, saying what they would like for the future. And then Jim mentioned that they had taken part with the Council on Aging and Dave Levac and our community impact around age-friendly communities. It was a 2-year process, and it resulted in the production of the Community Impact Report. Now, what is interesting is when we did this one 10 years ago, we had 99 recommendations from people that live in Brantford Brant as to what could be needed as they aged. They wanted to age in place. So what happened was when we did this 10 years later, we ended up with 628 suggestions. 135 of them have to do with housing. But what you need to know, all of you people in this room, you're all aging. You started when you were born. But you know, when you get to 45, you need to think about what are you going to do for the future. And wouldn't it be nice to be able to age in place? And that's exactly what this project does. Yes, there's problems that need to be, or issues that need to be addressed. Look at the technology that's been developed today. Look at the research. Look at the things that these people have done and are continuing to do, and will work with the municipality to make it happen. And that's what we need to do. Because you see, as the World Health Organization states, there are 8 domains that we call the aspects of daily living that we all live with. Transportation. They've addressed issues that people have talked about. How do you get to where you want to go? If you can get there, if you can go. There's many, many issues. Social participation. As you age, your family changes, your friends change. You have to have opportunities for social participation. Civic participation relates to working together around the municipality that you live in. This development is going to be a neighborhood made up of people taking part in social participation that are going to be able to work together with the people that are running it. Then we look at respect and social inclusion. Boy, haven't they addressed it? They're respecting everybody's input and looking at how can they get the support behind it, how can they address the issues. communication information, that's what this is all about tonight. Is sharing with everybody where they are and working out together where they're going to go and how they're going to get there. So community support and health issues. As I understand this particular development, they've even gone so far and didn't even cover it tonight as to the types of services that will be available for businesses, small businesses, as it relates to, maybe it's going to be veterinarian for people that have those pets that we heard about. Who has pets? We all have pets, and particularly we that are of the older population. When it comes to social services, yes, you have to go into the city of Brantford, but maybe there's some of those things will come out to the county, because there's a whole movement going on within the city and the county as it relates to the recommendations. And who made these recommendations? The people. The people did, and the majority of them were 55 and over, and they had the experience of what's happened in their lifetime and what's going to happen in the future. I don't know whether I covered all 8 domains or not, but my point is I'm excited, and I'm gathering, you can see that I am, and I'm excited for the people that live in Brant County. There will be a neighborhood that has been developed to be age-friendly so that they can age in place. They don't have to go someplace else. They've just thought about all the kinds of things. So I say congratulations to the County of Brant for the work that you've done. Congratulations in particular to Jim and all his technical people for the work that they've done. Thoroughly enjoyed working with you, and I'm so glad you listened to the people that live here.
Please control your emotions. There's a gentleman at the back that had a question an hour ago, and I'd like to give him the first opportunity. Please come forward, state your name and address, sir. Please remove your hat, you're in the council chambers. Thank you.
I'm Robbie Pierce. I own one of the properties that back up to this development. And the issue that I would like to know from the owner is all these huge trees on the property line. Are they going to still be standing there once this privacy fence is put up? That's the only question I have.
We'll answer that at the end, after everyone's had an opportunity to speak, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks for your patience. Next.
Mr. Chairman, members of the Planning Committee, my name is Willie Martins, which many of you know. I was I was Environmental Services Chair for this county for 8 years before I retired. And also, I am currently the chair of the Burford Seniors Housing Corporation, which is a nonprofit corporation that runs a 35-unit life lease development in Burford, which we're proud to say. And also a member of the Lions Club and a member of the community. I just want to touch on a couple of the disciplines or a couple of the focuses on these kind of developments. And I want to talk a little bit about servicing. When we built Westside Village in 1998, we scoured the province and many states to find the best servicing available at that time. And we ended up getting a certificate of approval from the Minister of Environment for a system that Waterloo University was quite active in and still are today. Anyway, it has served us well for 20 years now without any problem. When I heard the word responsibility agreement, we were probably the first ones to sign a responsibility agreement with the county. And I don't think, and I can guarantee you, staff has not heard from the MOE, and they have not heard from us, because there have not been any problems. We've looked after our system, and we've ran it well. We are a life lease operation, somewhat similar to what Jim's proposing. And that does give you the control over over the entire system, and you make sure that it's run right. So we looked at all these technologies and we came up with one that's worked very well. Fast forward 20 years, and I had the opportunity to join Councillor Miller at the Talbotville facility, which is identical to what's going to be built at Creekside. And it is absolutely amazing how far technology has advanced. Our system is working well, but this is a state-of-the-art facility. It's actually, and I think it's time for people to look at microservicing as full servicing. That's exactly what Westside Village was in 1998 to today, and that's exactly what this is going to be. Full servicing. The only thing about Jim's system that I would add, it is actually advanced full servicing. Because as many of you are aware around the table, I think, you know that the feds in the province are talking about nitrogen loading in the water. And you know we're going to have to retrofit our sewage treatment plants today, Paris, St. George, and all over the place, to reduce that nitrogen loading. This system is already ahead of that curve. It's amazing. So I want to say I was certainly impressed with the system. I have full confidence in it. And being kind of a technology buff, it was really great to see how well this operates. And I hope that the rest of these councillors and anyone else, when you get a chance to go see it, don't miss the opportunity, because you will be impressed and you'll learn a lot. It's very important, especially considering we're a rural municipality and we're going to need more of this kind of servicing. It's the future. It really is. For smaller systems and for smaller communities to be able to survive and have modest growth, not big growth, but modest growth, which this is. So I just wanted to say that about that and the responsibility agreement. I know there was some question raised about that. Don't worry about them. You've got 20 years of experience. Draw on that experience. It's not a problem one iota. And I think Councillor Chambers, who was at the start of this, can attest to that as well. The other item I would like to talk about is a need. Because we don't have conventional servicing in Burford, you know, there's been practically zero growth for a long time, or very minor growth at best. We have a good core of businesses in the downtown, but like any, retail's tough in today's environment, and like any town, there needs to be some growth for survival. And that's that's what they want to do. They just want to survive and feed their families and run their businesses, but they do need a bit of growth. This will certainly add to that growth. And the lady that presented earlier, I can tell you, I agree with you 1,000%, because the reason we built Westside Village in the first place was for aging in place. It's so important. We have 20 years of experience with that. It works wonderfully well. The people don't have to leave their community. When we built Westside Village, it took us exactly 365 days. In that 365 days, those 35 units were sold. They were life lease, but they were sold. In town, in the town of Burford, we had many houses where the seniors came into Westside Village. Young families moved into the homes. How could it get any better than that? Like it was really so valuable that way, and we were so happy to see it. And from another need standpoint, I can really attest to the need in Burford itself through our experience. After we sold the 35 units, we started a waiting list. And for the past 10 years, that waiting list has been 150 to 160 names on that list at all times. We cannot supply it. We only have 35 units. Most of the people live there for 15 to 20 years before they pass on, and longer. So, do the math. Most of the people on the list aren't going to make it, except with Jim's development, now they have an opportunity to age in place. So if there's any doubt at all whether there's a need in our community, it is definite. It's there. We've experienced it. It continues, and it can be met. And Jim Brown's development can help meet that. So I do, and I heard a topic about sidewalks come up, and that's a valid concern. We don't have sidewalks at Westside Village. And it's exactly as Jim was indicated. The people love it, they walk in the streets. This isn't a 50 kilometer zone, it's a 20 kilometer zone. And it's your neighbors. It's a community of people. They don't want to run you down. People are very comfortable walking in the streets. Well, maybe the odd person, but most of them not. But, so it does work well with us, and it does eliminate those hazards that we're talking about for sidewalks. So those are just a few items I wanted to hopefully lay some fears to rest. You have the experience in the county itself. You don't have to look outside. It's right here. You've had 20 years of experience. Tell me if it's been a problem. I know it hasn't. Tell me if it's a benefit. You all know it has been a great benefit to our community. Thank you very much.
Anyone else in the audience like to present? Please come forward, state your name. Sure, there's a gentleman at the back, if you'd like to come up, I'm going to have a on-deck circle.
Hello, my name is Dan Dignard. I am a resident of Burford. I have been a resident of that particular area and in Burford for the last 60 years. There's always been a mystique that has been with the town of Burford since I was just so high. Everybody wanted to be from there. And I've had people say to me, why would you ever just want to be from Burford? Well, we keep it a big secret. The people there are very nice. The people there are very progressive. The people there are very jealous in terms of what they have and what they want to keep. They want to see a community that we can all be proud of, that we can stay in. And I won't go on about living in place, because my wife and I just had that argument the other night there. And I'm getting tired of cutting grass. But the long and the short of it is, with this particular project that's been given to us here again this evening, and I've been following it since its inception, it's leading edge. There's leadership that can be shown by everyone in this room, and I'll go to the people who came out here this evening in support of this particular project. You're leaders because you're here, you're interested. And this council and the whole of the planning group, we have an opportunity here to say yes. Tell us why this project can go. Don't tell us why this project cannot go. We need this project for growth in our community. When I was just a young fellow, we did lots of things in Burford. There was lots of businesses in Burford, and over time, it's eroded. We know that. We're down to a one bank town now. We're down to a one doctor's office town now. Yes, we do have a dentist. Okay, that's a growth. And our biggest employer in our particular community is who? The county. The county have a very big stake in Burford, and we're very pleased with that. And a number of those people actually work and live in their community, and that's what we're looking for, is those kinds of opportunities where people can be there for the children, can grow up there, the grandparents can be just down the road, and I just became a grandparent for the second time, and I'm very happy about that. So I do want my kids to keep coming and seeing me, and if it has to be in this particular type of community, all the best, because we've got lots of parking. But we now have the county has a challenge, and they can show continued leadership here in the province by moving forward with these kinds of projects. Thank you.
Gentleman in the front row, would you like to get in the on-deck circle, please?
My name is Bob Gibson. I own Craven & Burger in downtown Burford. And I'm excited for Jim's project. And the reason I'm excited is because Burford needs growth. I can tell you, we followed Jim's progress for the last three years, followed his due diligence in everything that he has done. He comes into the restaurant, and I always ask him, well, when are you going to spray ground? And it's one council meeting or another report is due or something else. We've had several customers come into our restaurant, and the first time I was told this, and I've been told it by more than one, is we don't live in Brant County. we live in Kent County. And I laughed when I first heard it. And then I was kind of embarrassed by it. Because we need the growth. As a small business, trying to make ends meet is difficult. And we have followed Jim for 3 years. And I'm here tonight to stand before you and say, if we do not get growth, we will not be following Jim in 3 years. Thank you.
If anyone else wants to speak, please come to the on-deck circle.
Yes, Mr. Chairman and fellow members of the committee. Rick Leach, I live on 6th Concession, the part just north of Burford. I can see Burford out my back windows. And I followed this project along as well. I've gone to the public meeting we had in Burford at the Legion. Good place to have it, Ron. And I was surprised, to be honest with you, because anytime you have a public meeting, especially at the early stages, you get people standing up and objecting, talking about everything. I don't believe there was hardly anybody object that night. There was questions, including my own, which I thought was a pretty good sign of everything. I look at this thing, not taking away anything that anybody else has said here tonight, because I think most of them are dead on, but as my my counselor over there, Mr. Chambers, knows, all the real decisions are made in the coffee shop on the mornings, right, Robert? And again, people have had questions, but nobody's really come up and said, oh, hell, I don't want that thing in Burford. That's pretty amazing when you come to think of it. And I look at this thing as a little different. I've just read, I believe it was in the newspaper this week, of all the people that are going to be building houses, mainly in Paris and St. George. And I, for one, I always think, well, God, we got all these people in here. My taxes should hold true, but they keep going up. And I do not like paying taxes. And I certainly don't like paying the amount of taxes that I'm paying. But you bring people in, and they want, a lot of the time, what they've had from someplace else. They want a bigger community center. They want more services. And the county is usually forced to, at one time or another, build them. Where does that money come from? Out of the tax base. We've been helped a bit by some industrial coming in, we know that. But I don't see my taxes staying the same or being lowered for sure. So this is one of the reasons why I like this development, is that the county, it's a win-win situation for the tax people. They're going to get taxes from that. They're going to get lots of fees, I'm sure, but I don't see them having to put hardly anything into this. So I think it's a win-win situation for the county, definitely for Burford. I have always been somewhat undecided whether, and myself, I'm not alone in this, whether we wanted water and sewers in Burford and have, expansion in all directions. This answers a lot of those questions. And then I said one of the main things to me is that we have, as a taxpayer living in the county all my life, I don't see my tax money going to this development. I see it as more of a self-sufficient unit. And obviously, Jim and his crew have done their homework. So I fully support this thing, and I fully support council and councilors and staff to do everything possible to get this development to move forward. Thank you.
Any other member of the audience like to speak? Don't be shy. You took the opportunity to come out tonight. Now's a chance. We're not against you here. We're not bad people at committee. We want to hear you talk. Yep, please come forward, sir. Don't be shy. We are not against you.
So I live at 196 King Street.
Name?
And West McDonald.
Name and address, please.
196 King Street. And my concern is the water. I know myself and probably most of the people along King Street are on sand points, probably average 16 to 18 feet deep, and I don't understand how this is not going to impact my well, my water. Did you guys hear me or no?
Yes, we can, I can hear
So
you. Speak in the microphone.
that's a question that I have. The well, how deep is the well going to be? What's the elevation you guys are going to pull water from? And is it going to affect the aquifer that we pull from, which is much shallower?
Thank you. Those questions will be answered at the end of everybody presenting. Is there anyone else who would like to present? I'll ask, please come forward, sir.
I guess I got a few questions. Hello, my name is Skylar Demir. I live on the west side. You can see my shed there against the property. I didn't find out till now that the sewage treatment plant is basically about 200 feet from my well. And now they say it's all well and good and it's going to be clean water coming out of there, but what's to guarantee that? And not only that, I have a low-lying property next to that. If they do major grading, how is that going to affect my property? He's explained about well, he stopped by my house tonight and explained about digging out the Lewis drain, but I don't understand how that's low impact if you're excavating that amount of material out of there. We have pictures from this winter, basically from the sewage treatment plant to the clubhouse is basically underwater. So like I said, any grading there is probably going to affect my property. So I just want to know for sure that, you know, nothing's going to happen or my well's not going to be affected by the sewage treatment plant being so close. That's all.
I got a question about that permeable.
I'll ask a second time. I want to give everybody else an opportunity to speak first, then I'll come back to you, sir. Cool. Anyone else in the audience would like to speak to this application? I'll ask a second time. Is there any member of the audience who would like to speak to this application? Seeing no one else, sir, come back to
the permeable pavers. Now that's just the driveways, correct? That's not the actual roadways, I'm assuming. So is it the hopes that the stormwater sheds off the roads and gets caught in the driveways? And if everything is frozen in the wintertime and you do get a quick melt that's going to melt, say, before the ice on these driveways, I think you're still going to get stormwater runoff, personally. Can I go into another question right with this?
Yes.
My other question is elevation. So you're talking about putting a fence up. Are you guys, is the elevation going to change along our property lines? Are you guys going to maintain the same elevation? Is the fence going to be at the same elevation as my property line now? Or is it going to be lower? Is it going to be higher? The 7.5 meter setback, is that to the wall of the house? I know I got a couple more.
Don't speak into the mic, sir, so don't be shy. It won't bite you.
I think that's it for a minute. I'll think about it tomorrow.
I'll ask a third and final time. Is there any other member of the audience who would like to speak to this application?
Sorry, I just remembered another one.
Okay.
So the septic. So you said third party.
Speak into the microphone,
So
sir.
third party is going to look after the septic system, right? So who comes up with the criteria over what passes and what fails? How often does your discharge get sampled? Who samples it? And is there a certain amount of criteria? Like, do you have to sample so many times before you can discharge? You must have to come up with clean samples before this can actually be discharged, right? And how often do you sample? And what if your system fails? What if the power, I don't know what runs your system, what if the power goes out, what if the generator blows up, what happens if the system fails? what happens with the wastewater then?
Is there anyone else in the audience who would like to speak to this application? This is your last chance. Seeing no one, I'm going to close this portion and ask the applicant and his crew to come back up and address some of the questions that have been asked. In fact, try and answer all of the questions that have been asked. Starting with a couple property owners that were concerned about the tree line that is currently there. What happens to those trees?
Rob, in a word, absolutely. All the trees that are on the tree line that we can save, that are savable, are staying. And we also have many more that will be put in place. We've talked with a couple of the neighbors. Where it's appropriate, we're going to try and put either cedars or other trees. So I think you're 4 or 5 down from the end, are you? So we will sit and talk with you and say, look, this is where our house is going to be. Where do we want to put a couple of cedars to provide you a screen, shading, whatever, so that you don't have windows looking into windows, to just give you that little bit more extra. And we will be putting in some trees to fill in, because there's been a lot of the big trees that have died off or been damaged. But the ones that are there now, we've already talked about the fencing. We won't be taking down a tree for the fence. So if it's on your property, I hope you keep it. If it's on our property, we will keep it. And if it's shared, I'm hoping that we're going to be able to just put the fence on both sides of it so that it's good in that respect.
There was a question about one of the property owners near you has his well, and he has concerns about when you drill your well, are you going to be affecting his well? And how do you prevent affecting his well with your well?
We had some testing that we had to do, and I'm actually going to get Rob to answer that.
Thanks, Mr. Chair and committee, through you. Yes, we installed a test well on site and did a pump test on that test well. That pump test was done with continuous pumping for a 48-hour period, and it pulled from the ground around 3 times the flow rate that is needed for the entire development on average. So, 3 times what's going to be needed. And during that pumping test, there are also a number of monitoring wells that have been installed on site. There are also a couple monitoring wells near the site but outside the site. During the pumping test, the water level in those monitoring wells was monitored, as was the water level in a few wells on surrounding properties. During the pumping test, that monitoring showed that the drawdown on the wells, the worst case was 5 to 7 centimeters kind of thing, and that being within the seasonal fluctuation of the groundwater table anyway. So the conclusion of the hydrogeological report was that the drawdown is not anticipated to be a problem in any of the surrounding wells. You may ask the next question, okay, that's fine, that's a 48-hour pump test. What about, in the long term, in the future? Taking the data from that 48-hour pump test, the hydrogeologist extrapolated the drawdown data over a 20-year period, and the conclusion was the same. There's not expected to be any significant drawdown or any negative impacts on surrounding wells. In the event that, in the fullness of time, a problem does become apparent, Creekside Village is obligated to investigate any complaints about surrounding wells, and if the investigation shows that there is, the Creekside Village has had a negative impact on a surrounding well, Creekside Village is obligated to make good. I think that covered it all.
I can just add a little bit of clarity to that from the okay, there it is. The wells that he's talking about are right in here, and the well that they did it, the drawdown was right local where the water was being drawn from. But my understanding, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, Rob, 5 meters out where our monitoring well was, it was like a centimeter after 48 hours. And they projected going out, the closest well, I believe, is, well, the house in the middle, in any event, and it had absolutely no effect on it whatsoever.
Another question was, chap that is going to be living or is living near where your treatment plant, sewage treatment plant will be, how is the grading going to affect his property?
Okay, thank you again, through you, Mr. Chair. I think that was two questions as well. One, the wastewater treatment being 200 feet from my well, what's to ensure that my well is going to be clean, that, and the second part of that being the low area, how is it going to be impacted by the grading of the site? I think those are the two. So to answer the first one, the wastewater treatment plant will discharge, the wastewater treatment plant will discharge to the Lewis drain with a surface outlet, and that Lewis drain, of course, flows to the north to Whiteman's Creek. So the effluent coming out of the wastewater treatment plant, the treated effluent, will be flowing away from the well. Perhaps Joe would want to say more about that. I'm not sure. The second question, the low area, how is that going to be impacted by the grading? Adjacent to the house or near the buildings on the neighboring property, there's no grading proposed. The grading proposed on the west side of the Lewis drain is north of there, adjacent to, but not in, the wetland that's there to lower the grade and kind of expand the area of the wetland to offset lost flood storage on the other side. Thanks.
Another question was on the low-impact development, is it just the driveways or is the streets going to be in the same condition?
I can assure you it's all of the hard surfaces, so it's the driveway, parking lots, and streets. And Glenn's better able to answer the rest of your question.
Another question that I have listed was the elevation on the property line. How is that going to change or affect the existing people that are already living there?
Sorry, I was just going back to the previous question. He was asking me to
okay,
address that.
yeah,
Sorry.
go ahead. No,
if you,
information you have, go ahead.
If you look at the gray areas on the site plan, that's all the streets, and what Jim was just talking about, that is where all the permeable pavers are going to be. So about 15% of the surface area of the development is basically for the purpose of stormwater management. If you think of a traditional development, you might have a retention pond. Hopefully I'm pushing the right button. So a retention pond might be somewhere down at this bottom corner of a property that accepts all of the water from the entire development and is intended to try to get it back in the ground. We're using all of that gray area. So overall, we're actually increasing the surface area for infiltration as compared to typically what's done. Okay?
But if it is covered in ice, what's stopping it from flowing down on the street?
Sir, hold it. Please do not speak out from the audience. You had an opportunity to speak. I'm not going to let this happen. Sir, I cannot let this, I cannot allow this. He's going to answer your question.
I don't know if, Jen, you want to touch on some of this from your research. I can also speak to when permeable pavements are the entire, again, the driving surface. So there is occasions where if you're driving over top, you might compress the snow in a certain area and that becomes clogged. But the other areas have snow sitting on them, and when that melts, it's able to get through. If you're referring to the entire thing being clogged with ice, that doesn't happen. There is natural convection of heat that comes up from underneath. It is a phenomenon that, again, because there is open aggregates there, it's different than dense graded aggregates. When I say that granular ray is used under usual roads, this is an open stone. It has 40% void openings. There's a lot of air that can move around in there. So it doesn't freeze the same way as you traditionally think. So yes, you can get ice, but it will melt very quickly and drain back into the ground. I know I'm just calling Jen up because she's doing research on that right now, so.
Yeah, so what you're describing is a rain on snow event, which we get a couple times a year. And in fact, we get increasingly with changes in climate. And it is the most challenging hydrologic condition to manage because you have like this snow and this ice that's blocking your pathways. And so as Rob has already sort of alluded to, one of the things that you do have that's affecting the way things are behaving is you have this geothermal effect because you have so much open space underneath. So in my experience, I have never seen a situation where an entire permeable pavement is completely sealed off entirely, and then you have this like catastrophic rain event that is then blocking things out. And as an academic, I could say that yes, that certainly could happen, but we'll be dealing with a lot more problems in the county than just this property in that event. The way these pavements behave is if you have thawing happening at the surface, that then progressively moves itself down, and you do not get completely sealed joints. So you have a pathway for that water to move in, and as you have at least half a meter of open aggregate underneath, you have this storage space. So that even if in a worst case scenario, even the ground below that is completely sealed off, which normally your ground it stays at like 6 degrees all year round. Even if that, you still have that capacity then to hold the water. So you certainly don't see this sort of overland flow of water that we associate with our urban developments. And more challenging than the winter conditions really are going to be your summer events, is when we get the really intense rainfall, and that's what causes a lot of our problems, especially when our communities grow. And permeable pavements, they nip that in the butt, excuse me, because their ability to accept the water is so much higher than any sort of natural rainfall, that even if we had, extreme Hurricane Hazel, like rainfall intensity, or July 13th, or 2013, a few years ago, there is that ability to accept that water right away so that you don't have it on the surface.
I can add one more thing. There's several studies across this country and the states that indicate, and actually I believe one of yours as well, the system works till it's minus 25 degrees Celsius. We don't create a lot of water at minus 25 degrees Celsius. Chicago did a study where through the whole winter, the lower level never froze for the entire season. They had monitors at top, medium, and bottom of the roadways that are there, and it never froze in Chicago. And Chicago's a pretty cool place too. So.
Another question I have listed is there going to be an elevation that's going to affect the existing properties that are already there?
We're going to agree to that. Thanks. Yeah, the idea is to match the grading as closely as possible to the existing ground throughout the site, including matching at the property lines. Now, of course, we have to match at the property lines one way or another. Because we need to direct surface drainage towards the roadway, to the permeable pavers, and to the driveways, the backs of the lots will be a bit higher than the fronts of the lots. And as a result, there will be areas where we have to raise the back of the lot 3, maybe 4 feet, or around a meter above the existing grade, which will
3 or 4 feet.
Yeah, feet. To get the, as I said, to get the surface drainage directed from the back of the lot to the front of the lot. Now that difference, it would again match to existing at the property line, and then be sloped up into the lot to get to the high point and then fall back. Through the detailed design process, we will try and minimize that as much as possible to achieve an earthworks balance on site, and also to minimize the difference, to avoid having a fence perched up in the air, to avoid having the houses that are being built appear to be perched up in the air above the existing development.
Thank you. That's all the questions that I had listed, Jim.
Okay. I'd just like to thank everybody, and Rob, or if any of the others have more questions or want more details, you and I spoke before, Wes, you're more than welcome to approach me or give me a call. And if I don't have the answers, we'll find somebody that will.
Sorry, Jim. Sorry, Mr. Chair, I did write 3 other questions about septic.
Please come forward.
I'm not the guy with the answers, but I did write down the questions.
Okay.
First is, they're all with regard to the septic system. Who looks after the septic system? What criteria? Who samples it and how often? What happens if the system fails? Those are...
Mr. Chair. First of all, from an approval perspective, the technology is not new. It's been around for about 25 years. We've learned a lot over the 25 years to improve on it. In order to get an application or an environmental compliance authorization, this goes through the Ministry of Environment and Climate Change. It also goes through the Conservation Authority. Our engineering team is responsible to ensure that we have validated a process design, and then it has to be approved. So it's a pretty lengthy process, typically takes 9 to 12 months by the time all the reviewing engineers, both at the regional level as well as downtown, the approval branch, have to go through this to approve it. Through that process, there are requirements within that permit which enables the treatment on site, and those requirements dictate the amount of sampling, how it's done, and when it's done. I can tell you typically there will be an influent monitoring requirement, testing all the wastewaters coming into the plant, typically on a monthly basis, but there will be an effluent or treated water discharge testing requirement on a weekly basis. I can also add that over a period of time of compliancy, of not being outside of the parameters as dictated by the permit, that we also can apply for a reduction in sampling in an effort to try to reduce some of the costs associated with monitoring the plant. And every application that we've got operating, we've been able to do that because of constant compliancy. It is a membrane system, and to simplify it, the water or the sewage going into the reactor cannot leave the reactor without penetrating something not much different than your skin, about a 0.04 micron. So it doesn't allow much other than water molecules to fit through the membrane, so there's certainly an assurance of compliancy, because none of the raw sewage or solids are able to pass, as they will with most conventional technologies. And there was another piece of that, I think. As far as what happens if the plant is backed up by backup power, as well as there are requirements, again, as part of the permit, that enough redundancy be put in place by way of the design and operations to ensure that if a major component breaks down, there is another component that can back that up. The system is fully automated and monitored by pretty extensive instrumentation, and it is online 24/7. So we not only operate the plant and perform its regular operations and maintenance tasks, but we have it monitored 24/7. Should anything start to go south on us, we have an operator within an hour and a half of the site that can deploy, but we can also operate and troubleshoot remotely online as well. So the instances of something going afoul, to be honest with you, the risk is much less than it is at a much larger scale in a municipal environment. So I think that covers it.
Yep.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I'd like to thank the audience for your attendance tonight. I apologize to the gentleman in the gray shirt. I cannot allow people to speak out, because if I allowed you, sir, then I'd have everybody else, and the next thing you know, we've got a mob scene, and I can't allow that to happen, and I'm sorry. I'm going to call for a recess right now. You move to receive. Second. All those in favor? No decision will be made tonight. We've got a lot of things to look at. We've got to receive your comments and concerns. Staff will be working with the applicant, and at some point in time, a recommendation will come forward. Thank you very much for your attendance. Yes, a 5-minute recess. I just had visions of that guy. And then the next thing, you know, you got 10 of them.
I know, yeah. Especially in the summer too. I always love watching the summer. But, well,
You've got the first two. You got the first couple applications.
Yeah. Simple ones, I hope. What's that?
I'm sorry, but I'd like to reconvene this meeting. And people that I don't want to kick you out, but if you just want to chat with Jim and his crew, I'd appreciate it if you did it on the parking lot so that the other applicants coming forward, and there's 3 of them, can get their situation dealt with. So we'll move to public hearings under the Planning Act to consider staff recommendations. And the first one is A, William Walker at 375 Big Creek Road, ZBA 7-18-DN, and I'll ask our planner to present. Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Planning staff have received a rezoning application from Mr. Walker to rezone a portion of the lands located at 361 and 375 Big Creek Road. The application proposes to change the zoning on a portion of the subject lands from agricultural to the agricultural A9 to prevent the creation of a new residential building lot in order to satisfy condition of consent application B6717. The application has received provisional approval from the Committee of Adjustment to sever the existing dwelling at 375 Big Creek Road on a 1.7 hectare parcel of land. None of the agencies and departments circulated raised any concerns. Throughout the consent and rezoning application process, staff have taken the appropriate measures to ensure consistency with provincial plan policy and conformance to the County of Brant official plan. It's being recommended that the application be approved, subject to, or just approved. No conditions attached. This concludes my comments. Thank you.
Any member of committee with a question of our planner? Member Miller.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to Dan. I can't tell from the picture, but I mean, it seems like a large parcel of land to be severed, 4.4 acres. And you said in the report to incorporate the septic and the buildings. Where's the house on this location? I cannot tell. House is located here. So there's basically no way, I guess, to get around getting that smaller, that parcel? Because like I say, that's a large piece of land to take out of agricultural production.
Through you, Mr. Chair, the parcel that has been cut out, none of the land that is staying with the residents is actively farmed. There are a number of accessory structures on the property that are staying with the residents, as well as the driveways. The house is farther back from the road, so we've had to accommodate kind of the historical function of how the residence has been.
Okay, thank you, Dan.
Any other member of committee with a question of our planner? Seeing none, is the applicant or representative of the applicant would like to speak to this application, please come forward.
My name is Bill Walker. I'm here with Kitty McInerney.
Please come forward to the microphone, sir.
My apologies. My name is Bill Walker. I'm here with my neighbor Kitty McDonnell. I have nothing to add to Dan's submission. And if there are any questions, I'm happy to answer.
Any member of committee with a question of the applicant? Seeing none, thank you. How does the committee wish to deal with this application? Is there any member of the public would like to speak to this application? I thought the public left. There's one coming back. Any member of the public like to speak to this application? I'll ask a second time, any member of the public like to speak to this application? I'll ask a third and final time. Is there any member of the public who would like to speak to this application? Seeing none, I'm going to close the public portion. The application to approve has been moved by Member Eddy, seconded by Member Coleman. Any member of the committee with a question or concern? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. This application will go forward for final approval at council 2 weeks from this evening, sir, or 3 weeks from this evening. Next council meeting. Thank you. Next one. B, Streif Produce Limited at 17 Stage Road, ZBA 8-18-DN, and I'll ask our planner to present. Dan?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Similar to the previous application, we've received a rezoning application from, this time from Streif Produce Limited to rezone a portion of the land that is located at 17 Stage Road in the former township of Burford. The application also proposes to rezone a portion of the land from agricultural to A9 to prevent the creation of a building lot. And this is in order to satisfy the condition of application B6 from 2018. The applicant at 17 Stage Road has also received provisional approval from the Committee of Adjustment to establish a 0.45 hectare parcel of land, severing the existing residence as well as the accessory structure. The existing dwelling is considered surplus to the applicant's existing farming operation. There are no concerns raised through circulation, and staff have taken the appropriate measures to ensure that the applicant or the application is consistent with provincial policy and official plan. It's recommended that the application be approved. This concludes my comments. Thank you.
Any member of committee with a question of our planner? Seeing none, is the applicant or representative of the applicant here would like to present? Please come forward. State your name and address.
Good evening, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. My name is Jack Streif. I represent Streif Produce at 447 Highway number 2 in Princeton. Actually, we don't have anything else to present. We think that everything's been looked after according to what the regulations are. So if you have any questions.
Any member of committee with a question of the applicant? Seeing none? Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there any member of the audience who would like to speak to this application? I'll ask a second time, is there any member of the audience who would like to speak to this application? Third and final time, is there any member of the audience who would like to speak to this application? Seeing none, close this portion and turn it over to committee. How do you wish to deal with it? Member Chambers move, Member Coleman seconds. Questions or concern from the committee? Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? Is carried. This application will go forward to council on the last Tuesday of the month at council meeting for final approval. Sir? Moving on to C, Live Communities, 1024 Rest Acres Road, PS 4-17-RA/ZBA 28-17-RA, and I believe we're going to change planners. We've changed.
Nothing gets past you.
Nothing, I'm telling you. Welcome, Rashika. I'm sorry I didn't even see you come. Rashika is such a quiet individual, isn't she?
I try. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. Applications for draft plan of subdivision and zoning bylaw amendment have been received from MHBC Planning, agent for Live Communities. The applicant is proposing approximately 423 dwelling units, mixed-use block and park block. They're also proposing to amend the zoning on the subject lands from current agricultural zone to holding provision, site-specific residential, and site-specific mixed-use commercial, along with open space zones. The lands are situated within the primary urban settlement boundary of Paris and currently designated as urban residential and mixed-use in the official plan. The holding provision is proposed on phases 1 and 2 of the development in order to address grading, services, and access onto Powerline and Rest Acres Road. And the holding provision proposed for phases 3 and 4 will deal with the issues related to stormwater management, grading, and aligning street connections with Arlington Meadows, that's the subdivision to the north. The comments have been received from Losani Homes, which are attached to the addendum. This has resulted in a new condition, which is condition number 47A, which is also attached to the addendum. This condition specifically deals with Gurney Outlet Cost Sharing Agreement. In addition to that, the wording of condition number 21 has been revised to reflect that the final details of the noise attenuation measures that are required along Powerline and Rest Acres Road will be assessed after the completion of Rest Acres Road design. Both those conditions have been, as I stated, included in the addendum. Staff has determined that the proposed land uses are being directed to appropriate area and will not adversely impact any existing or future land uses in the area. The comments received from various departments and agencies have been incorporated in the conditions of approval. Staff is recommending that these applications be approved as the proposal is consistent with provincial policy statement and conforms to the general intent of the official plan. That concludes my remarks. Thank you.
Thank you. Any member of committee with a question of our planner? Member Miller.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A quick question through you to Rashika. Does that whole property, will that all be going to the Gurney stormwater outlet?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, phases 1 and 2, which is approximately that's the dividing. So south of that, which is these phases 1 and 2, will be to Gurney Outlet, and phases 3 and 4, which is the north of the property, will outlet onto the stormwater management pond approximately around here in Arlington Meadows subdivision.
Okay, thank you.
Any other member Powell?
Through Mr. Chairman, to our planner, on page 87, the T64 that's mentioned, is that where the roundabout will be?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, that's approximately where the roundabout will be. The T64 zoning is where the existing sales trailer is on the property, and that sales trailer will be removed once the roundabout construction will commence. And upon the registration of phase 1, they can also get approvals for model homes. So the applicant is here, and they can give additional details on the timing of those.
If I might follow up, the entrance to the former farm, that's on a different spot than where that roundabout is? Just trying to see where the access onto the Rest Acres Road, because right now there's 2 driveways off Rest Acres onto the former Codlin Farm.
Yeah.
And I thought, will the roundabout then eliminate one of those? Because I thought the Department of Highways wants us to reduce entrance exits off a road like the Rest Acres.
Through you, Mr. Chairman, there won't be any new entrances on Rest Acres Road frontage along this entire property. The existing entrances will, of course, be removed because there's units that are being proposed just south of that roundabout where the existing entrances are. Approximately where the sales trailer is, that's where the street B that is shown, which is connecting to the roundabout, that's where the street connection will be. So there won't be any kind of driveways along Rest Acres Road.
Thank you.
Any other member of committee with a question of our planner? Seeing none, is the applicant or a representative of the application here would like to speak to this? Please come forward, state your name and address.
Good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Thanks for the opportunity to speak this evening. Thanks, Ruchika, for setting me up.
Sorry, Adam, help, please.
Just as that gets set up, with me this evening are Andrew Mulder and Josh Donnell from Live Community. So if there's any questions, they're here to respond as well. And Emily Elliott, who's at my office, and I didn't say my name, Dave Aston with MHBC Planning. So we're kind of excited to be here tonight. We've worked over the past year with planning staff, engineering staff, Ms. Anglish, Mr. Trotter, and others quite diligently in getting this application brought forward to committee and hopefully based on the staff recommendation to council. We saw this as a great opportunity in working with the county staff and moving forward with an approval before this committee. And so working at a solution that was made here with staff and with council. Ms. Angers covered the subject lands, and this is generally, these are the lands, an aerial photo of the lands. You can see that the lands to the east of Rest Acres Road are what referred to as the Mile Hill subdivision. So the west are the subject lands. To the southeast is the Brant County facility. Lands are located in a designated growth area and do represent an extension and logical growth pattern in that area. This covers what I was speaking of. To the north are the Arlington Meadowlands, which are draft approved, and this picture is outdated as there's earthworks and servicing happening there. So the time is correct as it relates to servicing and proceeding with development on these lands. The draft plan of subdivision, we've been through the required process, which started with pre-application with county staff in December 2016. And then that process, as you're aware, identifies a number of studies to be prepared and submitted with the applications, and those were filed in June 2017. In working through the process, there was a discussion on location of the park facility. So we worked with county staff and went to the Parks and Recreation Advisory Committee to receive input, and then back to the committee to land on the location of the park as it's proposed on the plan of subdivision. And then there was an informal public meeting, or I call it an informal public meeting, but a meeting of the Planning and Development Committee meeting in December in 2017. So since then, we've been working with staff, responding to comments received, and working through other various studies that have been ongoing, such as the Rest Acres Road Class EA. So all of that has been part of the consideration and the recommendation that is before you this evening. The plan of subdivision, again, Ms. Anglish covered this, 423 dwelling units, mix of unit types, single detached housing, townhouses, and those are identified in the light orange color on the screen there. The park is centrally located within this block, and the park is proposed in phase 1 of the development. So the intent is to have that park developed early on and not in later stages of the development. There's a mixed-use block, and that's providing opportunity for commercial and retail and potential for residential above that as a mixed-use component to the development. The density is 18 units per hectare and 55 persons and jobs per hectare. which assists the county in achieving the density target requirements that have been established. As you can see, there is a network of streets. There's a street connection that goes to the north, as was mentioned, that goes into the Arlington Meadows subdivision. Rest Acres Road, there was a lot of work spent on the location of the roundabout, the design of the roundabout, and how that will work with this subdivision and adjacent lands. And there's no access beyond that roundabout to Rest Acres Road. Also, there was work done as it relates to Power Line Road and consideration for improvements to Power Line Road, and the proposed plan provides widening for Power Line Road, actually additional widening beyond what was required to ensure that there's appropriate design consideration given to Power Line Road. There's pedestrian connections located throughout the plan, and the mix of uses we see as being appropriate for the development and given consideration to the policy framework that's in place. I don't want to spend too much time here. Ms. Angrish covered this off. The lands are designated residential and mixed use. The uses proposed are permitted, and there's a variety and mix of uses that are proposed that conform to the direction of the official plan. The zoning bylaw amendment has zoning for residential, single detached, townhouse units, the parkland, and the mixed-use block. There are site-specific provisions that are requested. These are generally related to lot coverage, setbacks for exterior side lots, and many of these are requests that have already been considered and approved in other places within the county. The zoning also establishes minimum lot widths for single detached, and so the minimum lot width in this plan is 11 meters. So there'll be no lots smaller than 11 meters, and all single detached dwellings will have 2-car garages. So there's a minimum 11 meters and all with 2-car garages. We have some renderings of the different types of homes that will be proposed. So these are 2 examples of single detached homes. On the left is an example of a corner lot. So you can see that there's consideration given to both sides of the corner lot because it'll face 2 street frontages, so a garage side and the other side. So there's enhanced treatments associated with corner lots. And then the picture to the right is a 44-foot frontage lot, so one of the larger lots, and it's showing the double-car garage. As I mentioned, though, all of the single detached homes will have double-car garage. This is an example of the interior townhouses. There will be townhouses interior to the plan, and then there are other townhouses that we characterize as dual frontage because they'll front onto an internal street, and then they're also designed to have the appearance of frontage onto Rest Acres Road so that there's no view of a backlotting scenario to Rest Acres Road. So this is an internal townhouse design. This is an example of what I would call the internal component of the dual frontage townhome. So this will face into the development on the interior public street. And this is the rendering of what will face Rest Acres Road. So this design gives consideration to sidewalk connections, and what's rendered here is the multi-use trail. So there'll be connection to the multi-use trail from these units, and that multi-use trail is what was identified in the Rest Acres Road, Class EA. There's fencing to provide privacy between the units and the public road component, but you can see it still provides for interaction between the units and the streetscape. There's what appears to be a front porch or a front veranda on the units. That is an amenity area that's given design consideration to noise. So That's where when Ms. Angridge talked about further noise study, when the design of Rest Acres Road is done, we'll go back and take a look at this design, but we're confident that the approach to providing an amenity that is well shielded and well designed will address any noise concerns. So these were the technical studies that were submitted that went through review and comments and further review, and have been through that process accepted by county staff and other responding agencies. So in conclusion, we support the staff recommendation. We agree with the proposal's consistency with provincial policy and conformity with the growth plan and the Brant County official plan. The development's been designed to integrate with the communities that are planned along Rest Acres Road and provide really a quality and unique design within that area of Rest Acres Road. A lot of consideration has been given to the streetscape, and there's conditions of approval that will further require a more defined approach to the urban design and the streetscape along Rest Acres Road. So we'll be working with staff on that. There's a mix of unit types and also the mixed use block, which we think provides a good mix of land uses on the lands. There are no agency concerns identified, and any of the comments that were provided, if they were detailed, are addressed through conditions of approval that are before you this evening. And we, as I mentioned, are in support of the staff recommendation for approval.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any members of the committee with a question? Member Pierce.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, if I could, can you just pop back up a couple slides for me, the one you had there with the view from Rest Acres, that right there? Can you just give me an idea of, from the back of the house or the front of the house, whichever way you want to look at it, from there to the sidewalk, how much distance are we talking approximately there?
I believe we're looking at 4.5 meters, and maybe, I'm just, sorry, I'm looking to Mr. Mulder with Liv to confirm, but that's the design. Why don't you come up and you can answer as well. So there's a design consideration and then the zoning bylaw requirement as well.
Good evening. My name is Andrew Mulder. When we undertook this development initially through our pre-consultation with Robin Ruchika, we had initially most developers see a major road and we try to stick a noise fence along it. And through conversation, we realized that wasn't the goal here. I'm sure a lot of people here have seen what's happened in places like Brampton, where they build these wood walls along major roads and they start to turn to garbage over the years. What we looked at here was trying to come up with a dual frontage unit where we created an integrated amenity onto the building. So that building, except for this face, except for that porch that projects, it's the exact same townhouse as we're going to have on the rest of the site. We just have this extra porch on and that semblance of a front. We've got an upgraded exterior to it so it looks like the right kind of unit to front against a major road. What we've done there is we also want it drawn slightly closer to the road than would be typical. If you had a normal townhouse, you're going to have something like a 6 or 7 meter rear yard. But if you have 6 or 7 meters between this porch and the Rest Acres Road right-of-way, you're going to have people want to put stuff there. When you have space, you want to put things there. We wanted to draw this closer to the road so this doesn't become where people put their garbage, where people put kiddie pools, where people try to put hot tubs. We're fine having full restrictions on these that people can't put anything there. We want this to look like that forever. We're fine if there's restrictions that people can't do anything besides what we show there. And we've built, on that rendering you see there, those porches, we screened those edges in, and the steps come down the side. They don't come directly out of the house. You step onto the porch and down the side. We did that intentionally so that you could have patio furniture there, and that's actually rendered. We sketched it and looked at the heights of typical patio furniture. This is an actual view from the roadway. You wouldn't see patio furniture past that railing because it screens it in. So this is intended so someone could have somewhere to go outside and sit, but it doesn't have that appearance of having patio furniture visible on a lawn against a major road.
I think through, Mr. Chair, the specific answer is it's 3 meters from the property line to the building. From the road, I don't quite have the measurement because you have to consider there's a buffer from the property line to the multi-use trail, which I think is, that trail itself is 3 meters. And then there's another landscape strip beyond that for the multi-use trail. So it's 3 meters to the property, but probably from the edge of the road, it could be 7, 8 meters.
So if I could, probably to that fence is about your 3 meters, correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And if you would allow me, Mr. Chair, as a quick comment, I'm also on the Parks and Rec Committee, and I appreciate the fact of how you guys worked with us for that park, and I just wanted to add that. I know there was a lot of back and forth, and you guys came back with the idea there of where it is, and I just wanted to say thank you for that because it's going to work great in this edition.
Yeah, and I think just on that, Mr. Chair, we found that to be very valuable input, and that was helpful on our end as well, so we appreciated that.
And the icing on the cake was it's coming in phase 1.
Yeah.
Member Simons.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through your two presenters, and I'm going to go back a few years to the first construction phase of Cobblestone, and the condos that back up to Rest Acres Road have a wrought iron fence between their property and the back of their property and the road. And we had many complaints from residents. In fact, they're still complaining about the noise. And I questioned this when we first saw the conceptual drawing of this. Were you going to put a sound barrier fence up to mitigate the noise? Because this seems to be closer to the road than what that original one was. And they're still after to get a sound barrier road fence because it's very noisy. So I guess you've looked after it by putting these porches on, hoping that's going to do the trick. But I don't know, because Rest Acres Road is going to be 4-lane there. It's going to be very busy and very noisy. So that's my concern that I have. I don't want to have to, you guys come back and have to put a sound barrier up because it's noisy.
Yeah, through Mr. Chair, with regard to considerations for noise, we worked with our consultant and discussions with county staff, and the noise reports were done modeled based on the design of Rest Acres Road, so the current design that was approved by council, and so it's concluded that these are an appropriate design. There's consideration for a sound mitigation built into the decks as you see them there, or the patios as you see them there, and also through building design. And a condition of approval, as Ms. Angers mentioned earlier, will be to do a further design. At the end of the day, the intent is to not see a plan or a streetscape with noise walls. So we'll continue to work with staff to ensure that there's continues to be a very friendly and aesthetic streetscape along Rest Acres Road.
Okay, thank you.
Member Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The development looks nice, the pictures look great, and you've got children in that picture. What if there's 50 children in this community and 30 of them want to go across to the Brant Sports Complex to go skating, or when there's other facilities there, they want to go and do whatever? How do they cross the road at a roundabout?
Through you, Mr. Chair, my understanding of the design, and maybe county staff can confirm the design, but my understanding of the design is the roundabout provides not only the multi-use trail component, but the crosswalk component associated with the roundabouts. So that's built into the roundabout design, the ability for pedestrians to cross through.
So you're saying there's a cross, the trail comes up to the roundabout, and there's a crossing there for the children to use? What you said?
Yes, so I'm just looking at my image to see if I built.
Mr. Chair, if I may call a point of order here on this. This is not part of this process for this. The roadway and everything is the county's responsibility with the roundabouts. It has nothing to do with this development at all. So where children's cross and people cross there is not their responsibility, that's the county's.
I'll let your complaint stand. Yes, Member Cardy is correct. That's the county's responsibility in building the crosswalk, how individuals will cross. It's not the responsibility of lived communities.
So
Proceed with your next question.
Okay. Didn't live communities contribute development charges to improve Rest Acres Road and build those roundabouts?
Through Mr. Chair, subject to this plan being approved this evening and development proceeding, they would be paying development charges that would likely be built into improvements as it relates to Rest Acres Road. Or other projects, how you've identified through your development charges bylaw.
Thank you.
Member Powell.
Through you, Mr. Chair, to the presenter. Looking ahead to the future and your particular development, you're probably going to end up in a circle. Big developments to the east. To the north, there's at least one or two. Some we've seen the concept. I could see to the west of you power line developing, perhaps Skylar's developing. Now, is the infrastructure you're putting in, and when you've dealt with some of the neighbors, is everything going to be okay in the near future to handle that? Or are we going to end up going back and we need to double that water pipe or the sewer or whatever? Because it's going to be very critical for the county.
If I may interrupt, that'll be our responsibility, not theirs.
Okay.
Any other member of committee with a question of the applicant? Seeing none, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Be prepared, we have a big audience and may have questions. Any member of the audience?
I'm hoping two of them don't.
Have any comment on this application? I'll ask a second time, is there any member of the audience who would like to comment on this application? I'll ask a third and final time, is there any member of the audience who would like to comment on this application? Seeing none, how would the committee wish to deal with this application? Member Coleman.
So move the recommendation.
Seeking a seconder. Seconded by Member Eddy. Questions or comments? Member Gatward.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Through you to Rashika. Since it's the county's responsibility, can you tell us how the children will cross the road?
Through you, Mr. Chairman, I'll try an attempt.
Mr. Chair, if I hate to interrupt, but I can answer that for Razika. I go through roundabouts every day going to work, and there's crosswalks within the roundabouts. It's all built in the roundabout. There's crosswalks within the roundabouts.
Thank you, and
your question is answered.
Does that stop the traffic, the crosswalks, so that people can walk through?
You yield to pedestrians in a crosswalk, yes, you do. And actually, the crosswalks within a roundabout are safer than a crosswalk within a light, because you can take as much time as you want to get across. You're not on the timer of a light.
Thank you very much, Councillor Pierce,
Member
because
Pierce.
I'm not familiar with roundabouts. I appreciate that.
Member Pierce, you had your hand up.
No, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I was just going to help Razika answer that question.
Well, thank you very much. Any other member of committee with a question or comment before I call the vote? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. This application will go forward to council for final approval on the last Tuesday of the month. Moving on to 9, consent items. To be approved, there are none. There is one to be received. Moved by Pierce to receive, second by Cardy to receive. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. There are no committee reports, but there are staff reports. In the first one, Rajika, where did she go? I believe she had. She quietly slipped away.
I'll be prepared to move on option 2.
Option 1?
Option 2 for 11A.
Do you have a seconder?
Oh, sorry. Option 1. Sorry, option 1.
Do you have a seconder? We're dealing with 11A. Seeking a seconder. Second by Member Coleman. Questions or concerns?
I don't have a choice.
Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. B. Building permits and values, Brandon Hassan. It's a report. Moving to receive, Member Coleman? Second by Member Miller. Questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. C. Another report from Brandon. So moved to receive, Member Pierce, second by Member Simons. That's fine. You need a second or first?
I'll second.
Okay, Member Simons, you have a question.
I do, Mr. Chair, and this is to Brandon. Can you tell me what the results of this report will show at the end of the day?
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, it's kind of a two-part answer I can give in terms of a residential number that we would factor into this assessment. Really what it's going to do is determine the population targets that the province has put out for us. If we can accommodate that based on the land mass that we have under our official plan being designated for residential development, if we have an oversupply of designated lands to accommodate the population forecasted to 2041, which I believe is 57,000 residents, those lands will be put in a holding until such time that we can either service adequately to increase the number of development applications that we can facilitate in those certain areas. So, for example, Paris and St. George, fully serviced areas, predominantly that's where all the growth is going to occur. Areas such as Oakland and Scotland, those areas without services that are contemplated in the official plan would be put on hold until such time as we can get to those areas.
Okay.
And then from an employment standpoint, what we'll determine is if we have employment areas located in the right locations, and then if we do have an overcapacity or supply of employment lands, we can choose to change the designation on them to non-employment uses. So for example, residential.
Anyone else with a question of Brandon?
Thank you.
Seeing none, I'll call the vote. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried.
It's interesting.
Moving on to communications, 12A. It's a couple weeks late, but want to move to receive it? Moved by Member Coleman, second by Member Pierce. Nothing we can do about it. It's 2 weeks late.
Oh, and I appreciate that. If I could, Mr. Chair.
Yes.
I just want to know, we've talked so long about, playing nice in the sandbox with the school board. Did anybody attend this? This was received on May 9th.
I have no idea.
Yeah, through you, Mr. Chair, I did attend the meeting. It was very brief. It was more of a business-oriented discussion. They wanted to know the amount of population that we're forecasted over the next couple of years. And from their perspective, it was more of a business case study. As I said, they're trying to figure out if they should invest in new schools, retrofit existing schools. For example, if you were to convert a primary school to a secondary school, what would go into that? And then again, other options for them in terms of the change in population that they're expecting over the next number of years. So.
Thank you. I just want to make sure we were represented. We were, so thank you.
Member Ready.
Is the school board not aware of the details of the plan of the Niagara, the Golden Horseshoe requirements on the County of Brant? And are they not, I believe they're kept informed of our progress in growth, population growth on a monthly semi-monthly or whatever basis, what are they informed about?
Yeah, through Mr. Chair, through my discussions at that meeting, I did advise them that we will keep them involved in any sort of planning and forecasting that we do, similar to how the City of Brantford is doing their official plan update in terms of where schools should be located along their growth areas that they've got from the lands that they acquired from the county. And similarly to the growth that the county is expecting, being the 20,000 residents to 2041, where they're going to need some schools sites.
And do they acknowledge the information we send them?
Yes, they do. They're circulated on all of our Planning Act applications.
Fine.
So.
That's all.
Anyone else with a question? Seeing none, thank you, Brandon. It's moved and seconded to receive. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. 12C, an update on the hearing concerning Empire. Need a mover to receive it. By Member Pierce, second by Member Cardy. Questions or concerns? Member Gatward.
Did you skip B?
No, I've already voted on that.
Right.
You have a question or concern on C? Okay. All those in favor? Opposed? It's carried. Other business, none are listed. General Manager's update.
Yes, I have a few things to update on. One would be 1039 Rest Acres Road, which is the Lozani subdivision on Rest Acres Road. Through a lot of effort with Don Cunningham, he was chasing down the consultants to see about timing of the infrastructure completion out there. As a result of that, and staff's effort, Don Cunningham was able to find out that we could free up an additional 67 units for building permit eligibility. That was just determined, I think, late this afternoon. So the consultants, what Don had done is he talked to the different developers, said, here's what I'm proposing for a split. So they agreed to it. So Lozani will get, I think, a 33 or 34, I forget which number is, permits. We've been in contact with a few of the landowners who have been calling us and people looking for permits. So we've advised them that there is building permit eligibility. So that's a good news story. It's nice that we could chase that down and free up a significant number of permits actually for that area. I also wanted to update you on Brookfield, which is in the north end. Talking with Andre, I think you've all seen the building permit stats that were released that Brandon had written. I think it's quite surprising to see the amount of activity that's happened in the last month. Certainly our growth activity is really picking up like we were expecting it to. For Brookfield, that equates to approximately a little more than 60% of the lots that are available have permits issued for them. So it's quite a lot of activity. And in one case, certainly I think it was Adam Roseberg who's doing the area. And he's done up to 17 inspections a day up there in the north end. So we're really quite busy. And the other thing related to building permits is just formally announced. I had suggested, I think maybe the last meeting, that we have a new building inspector coming on. That's a replacement for a vacancy. Her name's Kate Yanzer. I probably have not pronounced that right. And she is starting, I believe, on the 18th of June. And that's all I have.
Any member committee have a question? Member Pierce?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Through you, I don't know how to say this, so I'm just going to come right out with it. I've had several phone calls, messages left at my place that a few of them have had some vulgar language in it, but the long and short of it is the one house that is built now on the Edgar property, actually there was the word stupider used in there, which isn't a word. They think it's ridiculous that it sat so long and now there's one house that is on the Edgar property and there's, 14, 15 on the other one. What's my response to these people? What can I tell them? I get messages weekly.
Yeah, I can tell you the circumstance for it. I mean, the Mile Hill subdivision has a number of different builders who are in there.
Mm-hmm. Yep.
It's not registered they're entitled to a certain number of permits. So the ones that they were entitled to is basically one per lot. There is conditions in the subdivision agreement that allow for, I think, a certain number of permits. And I came here, I think, talking to council saying we could do up to 25 model home permits. So the way it was distributed is that the Edgars only really wanted one. And it was a model home for, I think it was Dubecki Homes. And that's the site that they chose to put it on. The one in the north end, they asked for more and they got more.
Absolutely.
So it seems awfully strange. I know it looks quite peculiar. Part of it's just a matter of timing. I mean, the Lausanne subdivision, which is 1039, I'll say it's 1039 Rest Acres Road. You keep calling it Lausanne subdivision, but they're the builder, one of the builders. They were ahead of the game. They got into pre-servicing agreements with us that came to council. We were involved in the installation and inspection of those servicing. We were involved in the maintenance of them to make sure that the system was up to municipal standards. So they went through that process in that and worked with the county to make sure it happened. With the southern end, and the services was put in without any approval, no sort of warranty, no sort of inspection. That's actually has caused some sort of a delay. So the water was sitting in pipes. Now we have to make sure that it's cleaned, that it's not going to contaminate the municipal water supply. That takes a little bit more time. They are in that process.
Sorry to interrupt you, but I thought that was already all underway, them flushing those.
Yeah, and they are working on it. And I believe that they're continuing to working on it, exactly where they are in that stage. It's not completed. Where they are in the stage of cleaning it, bringing it up to municipal standards, it's in process.
So I appreciate all that information, but what do I say to the umpteen people that are asking me when our house is going to be built there?
And like I said, with the circumstance I've told you, it's really up to the developer to get in there and clean up the pipes and bring them to municipal standards. That's something that we're dependent upon them to do the work.
And I totally get that, and I get that. Now, that being said, with that seems to be public knowledge because a few people have said that and have said, well, why don't we do it for them? And my response to that was, well, it's not our responsibility to do that. But again, I don't mean to keep coming back to it, but am I able to just keep looking stupid myself, and I'm pretty good at it sometimes, to just say, I don't know.
All I can tell you is that they are working on it. It is their pipe. It's not a municipal system at this time. So it's not our responsibility to go in there. Our responsibility is to make sure the municipal system is not contaminated. So that's all we can do. So we can isolate it separately. So that is their pipe. They put it in at their risk. And it was their responsibility to maintain it. And we were on them saying, you must maintain it. You must make sure this is up to municipal standards.
Right.
There was delay in doing that. But if I'd say it's not, because it's all on private property and it's under private ownership and it's on one lot, it's not ours to maintain.
Right. Okay, so let me cut to the chase of it, Mark, and I'm just looking at, I don't want to put you on the spot here.
No, that's okay.
But would I be safe to say that by the end of the summer, we're going to see more than one house?
Yeah, and it certainly appears like they are working on it to get it done. Certainly, when I talked about the additional 67 permits that are available that Don Cunningham had worked with our consultants on, it was a sharing. So approximately half is going to the Lausanne subdivision, and the other half is being reserved for Mile Hill. That's being done in anticipation of work being done on there and the services getting to a point where we are going to be able to release some more. And it is being reserved for that, so we're anticipating that, yes.
Okay. Sorry to prolong that, but like I said,
it's
I
okay.
get
It's okay.
weekly calls on it.
Yeah.
Especially with the one house sitting there. Sorry, Mr. Chair.
No, that's fine. You're more patient with callers than I would have been.
We have been fielding calls with some regular people who are calling us as well.
Oh, I'm sure. Yeah. No, thank you.
Okay.
Member Chambers.
I just wanted to point out to Councilor Peters that stupider is a comparative form of the adjective stupid. It's a two-syllable word. The comparative form can be created either by adding the suffix "er" or by using "or." Well, stupider is a word.
Is a word.
The prefix words that were before stupider on the answer machine.
Does anyone have any questions of Professor Chambers? No more questions? Thank you very much, Mark. There's nothing listed in camera. Next meeting will be July 3rd at 7 o'clock right here. Move to adjourn. Now, don't leave because the mayor has a meeting.